Hey everyone, welcome. The woman sitting next to me needs no introduction, especially not here in the Bay Area. I will just say that for me, and I'm sure for many people in this room, you are an essential part of the soundtrack of many of our lives. Her official first ever children's book author bio. Tori Amos is a Grammy-nominated singer-songwriter, pianist, composer, and New York Times best-selling author of 2020's Resistance, the songwriter's story of hope, change, and courage. In 2005's Tori Amos Piece by Piece. She has released 16 studio albums, many of which I'm sure we can all recite, including her latest, Ocean to Ocean in 2021. This is her first book for children. Start us off with a reading from your book, Tori and the Muses story.
Just do a few pages, gang, okay? Tori loved to play the piano. One Saturday morning, Tori's father was going out, and she couldn't wait to sit at the piano playing all the things she wanted to play, and to imagine and dream. But her father wanted her to work on her piece for her recital. She never liked to be made to practice her boring music homework. But Dad, Tori said, those songs are awful and not any fun to play. I'm playing what I want to play, what the Muses want me to play. Her father raised his eyebrows the way he always did when she mentioned her Muses. The Muses? Tori Ellen, they're not real, and they certainly can't help you to play. What is very real is your recital. Those imaginary friends of yours get you into a lot of trouble. And your piano teacher and I expect you to play perfectly. Tori's stomach flipped inside her. I want to hear these when I get back, her father said, and plumped down her assignments. The best thing to do at a time like this was to make a sound. Just then, there was a knock at the kitchen door. Who could it be? Well, Tori's Muses, of course. All 11 of them. She had met them when she was just a baby. And they visited her for all these years with inspiration and magic. We have a surprise for you, Tori. They underscored this magical moment with a beautiful blend of their voices. The fairies have been working hard on it. Tori didn't always like surprises. That's true. But the Muses' timing was always right. Saved by the Muses once again.
Before we talk about the book, how does it feel to be back in San Francisco? You have such, not just a fan base, you have a community of people here. Does it feel a little bit like returning to an artistic home, a place where there's a lot of people that love you?
Well, yes, and during these times, it feels like a bastion of light and a place of resistance. I've been traveling from New York to Baltimore to Chicago this week in a few days. Bless the Washingtonians that were there and the Baltimoreans that are in peril in their hearts. Many are worried about their jobs, their families. There's a lot going on that isn't even reported about. And you could see the pain in their faces as I met each one. We were in a church that night in Baltimore. The New Yorkers, a little more like, we can do this. Chicago last night, worried. So here we are. And I believe there's a message that keeps coming as I cross the country, which is, there is light. The Muses, they can't be incarcerated. We can. And those who have come before us have been put in the gulag or some such thing. That can happen to humans. It can. But it can't happen to the Muses. And you can't fucking fire fairies.
A woman, a man. If you're standing there this is Resistance Central here in San Francisco. All right, so you said to me from the beginning that we could have a conversation, go a little off script. Let's do it. What is the role of art right now in this time where light is being suppressed? How do we keep art going?
Oh, it's everything. It's manna. As the Bible said, art will keep us from starving. It's the only thing that can. Art will keep us from capitulating to frozen terror. It has to be something whereby we utilize it in ways that we're called to. Your calling, Tony, will be different than mine. All of yours will be unique. And art can form itself, as we find in this story, through mathematicians, numbers, expanding people's minds and how they see things and think. Physicists, it expands from art to everything. I believe that. And I believe that it's our strength, it's our superpower. It really is. Because, people who are so involved in taking over the galaxy don't necessarily understand what the artists are doing or what the writers are up to. They don't necessarily understand or understood 1984. And they certainly didn't understand Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And what 42 even means.
I would say they certainly didn't understand Under the Pink. Many other things,
Well, it was going to be called God with a Big G. and the record label got really, really nervous. And so I just found another way to say God with a big G. It's the same.
Are the Muses not only the thing that inspires us as we know from mythology, but are they compasses in some way for you? Do they have the Muses help direct you?
Absolutely. Oh, without question. The children's book, once I was approached by Penguin because one of the heads of Penguin happened to be reading my liner notes, and I said all across the country, I honestly didn't think anybody read those. No, I didn't.
Again, people in this room have been memorized.
So, once they approached me, Francesco, do you want to write about the Muses and the fairies? And I said, yes. And then I went to them. I went to the Muses and I kind of went, well, should I be writing about this time? I mean, elections were looming. We knew what was coming. We didn't know the outcome, but we knew the playing field. And I said, should I do something more serious? And they said, there's nothing more serious than imagination. There's nothing more powerful than imagination. So don't underestimate the power of a children's book. You must open yourself to all forms of expression and don't denigrate or judge or put them in some type of what is more important. And sometimes getting to people and getting to their hearts and breaking down those barriers is a picture book.
Absolutely. Is Tori and the Muses the book that you wish you had had as a child? Did you write the book you wish you could have read?
I was in Baltimore the other night, and I literally passed little Tori, who was having to go to the United Methodist Church, and we didn't have a church like this then. It was very puritanical, and my father was the minister of the Everett United Methodist Church, and bless, he felt like he was doing what he should be doing. But it was more Paul-driven than Jesus-driven. It wasn't the Beatitudes. That's not what it was. It was more Paul. And so, as a young girl, not having love your neighbor as yourself, or the compassionate act of Christ as my guide, but having Paul, who sometimes when I would hear the messaging was, there's no place for me in this. Where's the Mary Magdalene in this? Where are the women in this? That I believe would be part of Jesus' circle. So therefore, when I was going to the event in Baltimore the other night, I just said to her, you've got to hold on and trust your muses. And one day, when you're 59 plus 2, you're going to be in a church just a few miles away from here that will invite you to talk about us and your relationship with us, the muses, and the fairies.
How is it for you dipping into the memoir autobiographical ponds in the context of a children's book? We certainly know it from your music, from your 2 other books. What is it like taking that same well and distributing it in a different type of product? Does it come from the same place, I would ask also? Does music come from the same place that your books have come from, that other creative endeavors come from?
It all comes from the same place.
Do you see
Why can't Tori read it now?
Just had a really exciting moment up here with you now. Do you visualize them, the muses? You have brought them to life if you're illustrated visually in this book, but do you have a visual sense of them?
Over the years, they come in different ways. They can be, I described it as light filaments. They can come as a collective. They can shapeshift. Sometimes it's a frequency. It's more sonic. It's not something that's like linear. It just so happens that with the brilliant help of Demelza and her gift with her muses, that I was able, she was open to listen to my descriptions. So they would go, notes would go, art notes would go to them, and then they would answer the art notes and send them back. It became really collaborative.
When you first encountered the muses, did you understand what they were? Did they frighten you at all?
I was so young, Tony. I haven't known a time without them. I did keep them, though, a secret from my parents. Even my mom, bless, because she was in a position that was the minister's wife. And so she was serving that. But she tried to serve me as best as she could, but there were restrictions, especially back then in the 60s. So I kept that really quiet to myself. And it was like this wonderful collaborative secret that I had with this source.
There's the word restrictions. I mean, it wasn't just the era that you were born into and the country that you were born into. We have a terrible tendency in our culture of restricting creativity, I feel like, of being suspicious, I think, of the origins of creativity, of being restricted and suspicious of creative women, and all of this, and all of this melange of things in our culture. I'm curious if that was also part of why you kept it secret, this idea that the culture at that time was very disempowering to women.
Oh, yeah. At the Peabody, I was told, you want to be a player because there aren't great women composers.
Oh.
Even though there were. But that was just the mindset at the time. And I wanted them to teach the Beatles. I wanted to teach the Beatles at the Peabody to analyze their work and to understand it from that point of view, not just teach the notes. And they said to me over and over, no one will know who they are in 30 years. And I got really shirty when I was 11, and I got sassy. And I think I said something like, God, you people are so old and stupid. Well, I lost my scholarship. So I got knocked out. But then, hey, help, I turned pro at 13. So, you know, with the help of the game.
So the LGBTQ community has a tendency of elevating certain artists to icon status. Judy, Barbara, Lisa, Tori. I feel like it's always been an exchange, though. I mean, the way I've heard you describe it in other interviews. I know what the queer community gets from you. Can I ask what we've contributed to your art?
Well, first of all, there was no room at the inn, literally, for me in Georgetown. Every door closed. No room, no place. Until there was a guy with gold chains standing at the door, and my father had on his collar, his minister's collar, and I was there, and he said, my daughter's quite talented. Could she come and play your piano? I see you have one. And he brought the manager out, and the manager said, sure, play for tips. Thinking, let's see what you got. And so I went in there, and the piano, they started to surround the piano. And somebody put a tip jar on it. Said, you gotta learn to do this, honey. And then they requested songs. Some of them I knew. Oklahoma, I knew the whole score. You know, I know and some of the contemporary songs. And then they gave me a list of requests to go and learn. And they said, if you learn this by next week, we will be here. And that went on for several weeks until I got a job down the street.
And that was your other conservatory, in some ways, it's always sounded like, and it's amazing to me that gamers were part of your origin as an artist.
First bar that let me in. I had been doing weddings and funerals. My dad got me 2 for 1.
Church life.
Yeah. So then, when I started working in the hotels, where I talked about in Resistance, where the liquid handshake would happen off 16th and K when I played right there down below the White House. And I didn't know what was going on in those war rooms off K Street. And that what people like the Koch brothers were planning. I hadn't read that Dark Money yet. It hadn't been written. One of the most incredible books that I've ever read. And yet I was there, unknowingly, while all this was happening and being planned. The next 50, 60 years being planned, 50 years, 40 years. And it was like, wow, all of a sudden they'd be in the bar and they'd have one of these lobbyists, a man 30 years older than I was 16 by now. And, you know, their hand would go down your back and just rest at your lower back. And it was the gays who would teach me how to maneuver out that inundation and just look at the men and say, and sir, what is your daughter's favorite song?
Amen to that. Well, I feel like there's so much we learn in our community from elder gays and drag queens about how to survive the artistic life. I feel like it was part of my experience too coming up. Let's get back to the book in kind of a bad segue way, talking about that piano. Piano in this book is a portable, a mobile pink piano. Have you ever had a pink piano?
Never.
There's the idea of a mobile piano, something that could travel to town, fantasy that you had, because it's not the flute, it's not something that you can easily pick up and take to the town square in your baby grand or your grand.
Well, in my world, I always wanted to walk my piano while people walk their dogs. I wanted to walk the piano and maybe play tunes for people as we walk around. Look, I'm in San Francisco.
We have any grants for the arts here. I'd like to request some funding and application. We do have pianos in Golden Gate Park in the Botanical Gardens quite frequently. I don't know how long you're in town. But what a wonderful idea. I feel like the piano is such a magnificent instrument that people have to come to. The idea that you wanted to walk it feels like just such another way of saying that you wanted to share your gift.
Well, and collaborate. I think the idea of the story in the book is when the Muses get her this gift that the fairies had made, and of course the fairies propel the piano. The piano seems to bring things out in people, so that as they've told her to go find out how other people find their inspiration. And not everybody has been able to find their muses like you did when you were a little baby.
That was an important part of the book for me.
Please.
When you talked about the muse appears differently to different people, the muse can appear as it does for the father in this book, in numbers. Again, we have to get out of these binaries. There is not one kind of creativity. STEM is not devoid of creativity, and creativity is not devoid of STEM.
We find Blake, who he realizes that his bugs, they are his muses. And the pink piano has this kind of magic ability to just help make things come alive. And Blake realizes this, and the insects do an insect ballet. And there's music that accompanies each part of the book.
Yes.
And the music tells another part of the story that's happening.
So for anyone like this, you've all heard this soundtrack. At what point did you know that this was both of those things? That this was the children's book, the soundtrack, and that it was both of them together?
Well, the truth of this is, my husband just looked at me and said, okay, so you're doing a book that is about a little girl that plays the piano. Where's the music? And I said, no, kid.
Is your husband another muse for you, in a way?
No. He's a very good producer, and an irritating one too. But he voices things. We have a team in place. The musicians, Matt Chamberlain, Ash Sowen, John Evans, Jennifer and Mark, of course. But, you know, they will voice things. There has to be a place. When I brought this to them, they were coming up with all kinds of ideas. And we were collaborating. They all saw the drawings before they were finished. They all began to see what was happening. And it became a very different kind of musical project. Because I didn't go through a label, not that anybody cares, but not that I have to answer to a label now when I'm with them. I'm in a different position now. However, when you are collaborating with a label, they do make suggestions and they do have certain ways of seeing things. But I thought, no, we're not going to do that. So it was kind of, it didn't have that involvement. It was just the musicians, the creatives that were involved in the music making.
Jamel said, were you ever in the same room? Did this all happen electronically?
Yes, electronically. She's in England, but so we had some meetings, of course, on Zoom, but then it would go through my editor, who was Francesca Sedita, to our editor. So suggestions, stories of where the Muses came from, songs that were associated with the Muses, all of that would be given over to the art side, and then Demelza would begin answering those things by saying, okay, so she comes from Mesopotamia, this one's Native American, and I'd say, but she's wearing a Renault blonde.
Why shouldn't she? One of the other things that just spoke to me so much in this is not just getting rid of this binary around creativity and intellect and thinking, but this idea that your muses can be part of your discipline, like part of your practice, that creativity and the other part of the structure are not exclusive, that these things can coexist.
And discipline.
Yeah.
All of that, like we're saying.
In your life and in your artistic practice, like what has the process been for you to find the balance between those things? The time where you can be free with the muses and the time where maybe you do have to implement a little bit more structure.
Well, I think sometimes the idea of chocolate carry water seems to be like, I don't know, a weekend spiritual practice where it's like, oh, that's not really fun. But in building some of these pieces of music, some of them took months and months and months. Insect Ballet took a long time. And not one that you hear had been written before the story had been written. So the story was the driver. I tried to reach back in my back catalog, and it didn't work. It just didn't work. It didn't resonate, and sometimes, just because we have to mine for it, mine for those things, it's not as if everything is downloaded. It's not as if a faucet just comes on and it gets downloaded.
Don't we wish sometimes?
Don't we wish?
Yeah, but it's not. No, it's...
Sometimes when you're staring at a blank page, you stare and you stare and you stare. And there can be, oh my gosh, I just can't find this. So then there is the searching, going to visual artists, going to nature, going wherever I needed to go, ordering so many bike books. There are people that have
There's
to
a
be.
lot.
There's a lot.
Out of your back catalog, not even the Toys soundtracks. I always think of that. Very different material. Before we get to the audience questions, I would like to ask how it feels to know that you're a part of the soundtrack of people's experiences. How does it feel when people tell you the types of stories that I'm sure you're going to hear tonight, and that I've already told you about what songs, what albums mean, how people can remember life experiences because of where music they were listening to at the time?
Well, on one hand, it's very humbling. And on the other hand, the Muses told me a long, long time ago, once these songs leave you, they're not yours anymore, Tori. They're not. We'll let you have the publishing. But they're not yours. They're for everybody. And one person's relationship with them is really not your business. Only if you respect that a song will have a relationship with somebody else, whatever that is. And even if they're telling you, well, they had a dream, this happened on Europa, and blah, blah, blah was there, and this happened. Just because winter didn't mean that for you, doesn't mean it can't mean something very different for somebody else. And you just have to respect that the songs are making relationships with other people. And it's unique to that person.
You have such savvy, well-informed muses. I think we told you about the publishing. I mean, it could be a CAA, you know? We have some questions from the audience here. They came in written form, so I'm sorry, anyone raising their hands. Hi, Tori. Do the Muses inspire you in ways other than musically? And in what ways? This is from Lindsay.
Sometimes they give me messages. Sometimes. But it's not usually, life learning things. Somebody can be talking to me, and they might just say, yeah, tell me to go to the Southwest. Could be a good thing. Now, it doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes it does happen.
How do you stay open to and receptive to the Muses? I feel like many people who don't have access to them probably aren't inviting them.
Well, how each person finds it, I realize it takes a leap of faith. If you haven't had them your whole life, I understand even me talking about it takes the leap of faith. And I've protected them for a long, long time, as in talking about them in this way. And yet, once Francesco approached me, I had some trepidation because I thought, I've really kept this pretty much, other than thanking them in the fairies, I haven't gone into depth, because somebody can say, God, you're from Cuckoo Land like that. I get it.
San Francisco, no one's judging.
Reverend Al Sharpton, of all people, got it. Of all people.
I was moved by, he said that he heard the Muses when he started preaching at age 5 or 6.
As a young boy. And he said, I know once the camera stopped rolling, he said, I know what this is. And the amazing thing about him, a religious elder, a respected person, is, if I'm honest with everybody here, I was a little nervous going on the show. It's a political show. And also, the great Reverend was there. And I didn't know if he would see this in a pejorative way that would insult the angels and God and that tradition.
Sure, yeah, his faith and his tradition.
But he was completely 180 from that. Once the camera stopped, he said, I understand this, and I'm going to read it to my grandson.
The safe moment for you and the Muses to come out, for lack of a better description.
To be honest, they told me it's time. It's time you talk about us. It's time that you get some courage. And we're okay.
It's not something they think you lack.
Well, you know, when you have something that's very, very special that you hold dear, you don't want it to be ridiculed or laughed at. But then they just said, we can take care of ourselves. We really can. This is about you sharing. Share, because this is a magic carpet ride for people. And it's a way of exploring your ability to create. It could be growing plants, Tony. It could be all kinds of things. You know, things that we haven't maybe in ourselves thought are valuable. But it doesn't mean it's not magical. Just because, you know, I wanted to be a great visual painter, I'm not. I'm not. I wanted to play the guitar. I'm terrible. I can't.
I feel as though you've been compensated in other ways.
But I'm just saying, sometimes we want it to be this, but we just have a knack for this.
I'm going to ask another audience question. Have your muses changed through the years? Different beings visiting at different points in your life? Or are the muses of today the same as those in the past?
I think they're the same. I think I'm the one who has to change and be open to hear what they're saying. For instance, I was writing the last song on the record 3 weeks ago, Monday, and I was driving everybody crazy because we were starting to mix. We were mixing. And so it was just one of those things where it wasn't coming together, so I needed to open myself up.
I feel like we said, it's not a faucet, it's not something that's on demand, but being able to make yourself available is as much a skill as playing an instrument, I think, sometimes, or having the command of the language, that receptiveness to them. Did any of the songs come to you before the book, which I think you said one had, or did they begin appearing during and after?
All the ones you hear that made the record all came after the book.
And there was one that
I tried to force on the project that was in my, you know, I have little songs that haven't been used, or melodies that haven't been used. So maybe I was trying to do a little shortcut.
I was going to say, too, sometimes my muses allow that, other times not so much. How about yours?
Well, not for this project.
Yeah.
It was the wrong tone. Because I was taking from another project, and they were saying, no, your intention has to be clear. This has to come from this frequency.
Are the muses perhaps a bit territorial about this project?
Well, they can be clear.
Diplomatically said. Telescope or microscope?
Telescope.
Follow-up question on telescope.
Because it's benevolent universe. I believe that. I don't have the brain for microscope. I don't necessarily have the brain for telescope, but I love looking at the stars.
What I like about telescopes is that they're outward facing. I mean, what microscopes can show you is important, but for me as a journalist, I spend more time looking up, I guess, than I do looking at the minutiae of biology. The telescope is perhaps a portal to another story.
Maybe.
Or another experience with the Muses?
Songwriters do both. They look inward and outward. But for me, there's something about looking out.
Are the fairies one of your muses, or are they separate?
They're separate. They really are.
I mean, the fairies are present throughout your work, but I hate asking an author about their next project while they're selling the current one, but might there be a fairy book sometime in the future?
You know, I'm not really sure where things are going because I just finished this. The music was really done 2 weeks ago. And then because we weren't doing vinyl, I was able to really push the deadline here.
I am familiar with the sensation as a journalist. Well, 3 books doesn't seem like quite enough. Of course, the Muses were knocking on the kitchen door, an obvious reference to Cloud on My Tongue. Are there other Easter eggs in the book or companion albums we should know of?
There's so many Easter eggs in this book. So many. Demelza even put a couple in.
Wonderful.
That I didn't catch.
I feel like this book reads on so many levels. Children are going to have one experience with it. I think longtime fans might have a different experience. Parents reading books to the children and young people. Maybe another like great art works on so many different levels. For me, it's again like you're saying about the music, the experience of your music belonging to other people. It feels very similar. It's of course these things exist on multiple planes.
Yes.
I think this is from a young person based on that. Or somebody who's just very neat penmanship. Writing capital letters. Dear Tori, what is your favorite holiday?
Well, one of my favorite places in the world to go to get inspiration is the Southwest. I've always loved the Southwest, but really taking pilgrimage. I mean, going places that you just to shake up the routine. I don't know if I call it might be a writing holiday or a search finding mission, is just to get out of my routine, where I usually am and go somewhere else, where the tastes and the smells are different, and it starts to really awaken my senses, so that I'm not going to the same coffee shop or the same cafe that I do when I'm in my routine. So I have to stay really present, because I don't know where I'm going. So therefore, I don't kind of get into this sort of walking through a fog. I have to really be present.
Tori, I am getting the sign that it is time for us to wrap things up, but I have one more question I've always wanted to ask you. Since I'm the moderator, I'm taking my turn. Who do you listen to? I know that I listen to you when I need you. Who's the artist that you seek inspiration, comfort, solace? All the many things I'm sure people will tell you they seek in you.
Well, to be really fair about this, I listen to so many things, and people tell me things that I haven't heard of, and that I welcome that. I really welcome that, because there's no way I can know about all the music that's out there. I just can't. So I welcome when somebody says to me, hey, check this out. Have you heard Miles Davis do this? It's like, no, I know Sketches of Spain. So it might just be suggestions from people, and that does make a difference.
Anyone that, I don't know, is in your top five most played artists in your playlists, or?
Well, I don't look. It's so
Miles Davis is good. We'll take Miles Davis.
It's so obvious, but I reference the Beatles for little children, because I think there's something in their work, whether it's Penny Lane, whatever it is that you're listening to, that they tapped into these codes at a time before other people did. You have a lot of bands and artists that came after them that I think tried to write music like they did, possibly me included, but there's something so pure about what they were doing and so original at that time that I've seen young children, the young nieces and nephews, when they come and visit us, they call me T-Bird and my husband Grumps. So, and Grumps puts on the Beatles. And they just dance around. They're alive. It's unbelievable to watch them.
I was hoping you would say the Beatles. There's a fabulous Paul McCartney photo exhibition at a museum just up the way. You can stay in town an extra day.
I just want to thank everybody. Thank you so much.
For your lifetime of artistic output.
We just have to not only hold on to our focus and our ability to create, we have to hold on to the idea that whatever we're creating, whether you're planting your garden, whatever it is, I've said it 100 times, but to deal with destruction and destructive forces and thinking and actions, the one way that I know is not to open carry, right? But to open a portal and collaborate with other frequencies, and how that manifests itself in your world, whatever that is. I don't know. You might be called to the herbs, to grow the herbs. I don't know. But everybody here will be called to do something that I know I can't do. So, it really is all of us by this fire, this metaphorical fire. Elders, it's time to take your place. Younger ones, we need your energy. We have to collaborate together because you'll see things we can't see, those of us 59 plus 2 and up. So much love. And the children, we have to nurture them. We have to give them the tools. You know them. We had the greatest music, some of the greatest music we were exposed to. We can share that with them.